When Daniel Rowe first saw the town sign, he was already lost. The road had narrowed miles back, dissolving from a two-lane highway into a cracked strip of asphalt that curved too often and too sharply to feel accidental. His GPS had gone silent without warning, the screen dimming to a dull gray that refused to update no matter how many times he restarted it. Cell service vanished shortly after, leaving him alone with the hum of the engine and the quiet pressure that built the farther he drove. The sign stood just beyond a bend, half hidden by tall weeds and a leaning guardrail. Briar Hollow, population 1,102. Daniel slowed instinctively. He had never heard of Briar Hollow. Yet the name landed with a strange familiarity, like a word remembered from a dream. He told himself it meant nothing. Brains looked for patterns when they were tired. That was all. He passed beneath the sign, and the air changed. Not dramatically, not in a way he could point to, but the sensation was unmistakable, like stepping indoors from a storm or entering a room where a conversation had just stopped. The forest thinned, revealing a shallow valley where the town sat clustered along a single main road. Houses leaned close together, porches low and wide, windows dark. Everything looked maintained, but only just, as if effort had been applied evenly, carefully, without affection. Daniel parked near what appeared to be the town square, a circular patch of grass with a flagpole at its center. The flag hung limp despite a breeze he could feel on his skin. As soon as he stepped out of the car, he felt it. Tension. Not a gaze exactly, more like awareness. The sense that the space around him had adjusted to include him had taken note. A man sitting on a bench across the square stopped mid-motion. A woman pushing a stroller slowed, her eyes flicking toward Daniel before she looked quickly away. He cleared his throat, suddenly unsure of himself, and checked his watch. Nearly 4 in the afternoon. Plenty of daylight. He'd only meant to stop long enough to get directions. The diner sat at the corner of the square, its windows fogged from within. Daniel pushed the door open, a bell chiming softly above him. Inside, the room smelled of coffee and grease and something faintly sour beneath it all. For people sat at separate tables. All of them looked up at once. The waitress approached him slowly. She was in her late 40s, maybe early 50s, her hair pulled back tightly, her expression unreadable. "Passing through?" she asked. "Yes," Daniel said quickly. "I think my GPS glitched. I'm trying to get back to Route 9. The woman nodded once. "That happens." She poured him coffee without asking. The liquid was already lukewarm. Daniel took a sip out of politeness, then set the cup down. "Which way should I head?" Another pause. "Too long." "You from around here?" she asked.
No.
"Family?"
No.
She studied him more closely now, her eyes moving over his face as if checking for something specific. "Then you shouldn't stay long," she said. "I don't plan to." The waitress glanced toward the window, then leaned in slightly. "Road's tricky after sundown. I'll be gone before then." She straightened, already stepping away. People always say that. Outside, the town felt smaller than before. Daniel walked back toward his car, but stopped when he noticed something odd. The square looked rearranged. Not dramatically, just subtly. The bench where the man had been sitting now stood a few feet closer to the curb. The flagpole seemed slightly off-center. He shook his head. Fatigue. He drove. The road out of town curved sharply to the right, then left, then straightened. After several minutes, the trees opened up again, and there was the sign. Briar Hollow, population 1,102. Daniel slowed to a stop, heart thudding. He checked his mirrors, turned around, drove the opposite direction. 10 minutes later, he passed the sign again. This time, the population number had changed. Population 1,103. A laugh escaped him, sharp, nervous. "Okay," he muttered. "Okay." He pulled over and got out of the car, standing on the gravel shoulder. The forest pressed close, branches unmoving despite the breeze. The silence was deep enough to feel intentional. Daniel took a photo of the sign with his phone. No image saved. His phone buzzed in his hand. No notification. Just a vibration. Back in town, he parked near the square again, this time more carefully. He noticed things he'd missed before. The absence of children playing, the lack of any visible pets, the way people moved with purpose but never urgency. Conversations happened in low voices. Laughter was rare, brief, and quickly smothered. A man approached him near the post office. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a sheriff's badge that looked old enough to be inherited. "You lost," the sheriff said. "Yes." The sheriff nodded. "That happens." Daniel exhaled. "Look, I just need directions. Or a tow. Or a map. Something." "You can stay the night," the sheriff said. "Try again in the morning." "I don't want to stay." The sheriff's expression didn't change. "I know." Something about the way he said it made Daniel's skin prickle. "I have work," Daniel said. "People expecting me." "They always are," the sheriff replied. "Until they aren't." The sheriff turned and walked away, conversation over. By dusk, Daniel had accepted the inevitable. The motel sat on the far end of town, a low building with flickering lights and a vacancy sign that hummed softly. The woman at the desk handed him a key without asking for ID. "Just for the night," Daniel said. She smiled thinly. "That's how it starts." The room was clean but sparse. No artwork. No mirror above the sink. The window faced the forest. Daniel lay on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. He told himself he was overreacting, that small towns were weird, that he'd find the right road in the morning and laugh about this later. At 2:17 a.m., he woke to the sound of footsteps outside his door. Not hurried, not hesitant, measured. They stopped directly in front of his room. Daniel held his breath. A shadow passed beneath the door, then another, as if someone were shifting their weight just out of sight. Then the footsteps moved on. In the morning, Daniel checked his phone. 3 missed calls, all from numbers that didn't exist. And 1 text message, received at 2:18 a.m. "You're settling in." He sat on the edge of the bed, heart racing, as a terrible realization began to form. Not sudden, not sharp, but slow and heavy, like a truth that had been waiting patiently for him to notice. Briar Hollow hadn't trapped him by mistake. It had counted him. Daniel tried to leave again at dawn. The light was pale and wrong, like the sun hadn't fully committed to rising. He packed quickly, barely noticing that he'd slept without dreaming, without the usual static of half-formed thoughts. Felt less like rest and more like being powered down. Outside, Briar Hollow was quiet in a way that felt rehearsed. No morning traffic, no doors opening. The diner's lights were already on, but no one sat inside. Daniel got into his car, turned the key, and waited for the familiar sense of relief that came with motion. The engine started without protest. He pulled onto the road. 5 minutes later, he passed the town sign. Briar Hollow, population 1,103. Daniel slammed his palm against the steering wheel. "No." He turned around sharply, gravel spraying. This time he counted the turns. 1 curve to the left, 2 straight stretches. A fork he hadn't seen before, he took the right branch. The road narrowed. Trees pressed in so close their branches scraped the sides of the car. The light dimmed, filtered through a canopy that felt suddenly too dense to be natural. Then the road ended. Not gradually, not with a warning sign. It simply stopped, dissolving into packed dirt and undergrowth. Daniel sat there, breathing hard, listening to the engine idle. When he put the car in reverse, the tires spun uselessly. He stepped out to look. The road behind him was gone. In its place stood a line of trees identical to those ahead, trunks smooth and unbroken, as if asphalt had never existed there at all. He didn't scream. The moment didn't feel dramatic enough for that. Instead, a quiet certainty settled in his chest, heavy and undeniable. Briar Hollow was not misdirecting him. It was reconfiguring itself. When he returned to town, and the word return sat badly with him, people were already awake. The diner was busy now. The square held more movement. Children he hadn't seen the day before walked in pairs, holding hands, their expressions oddly blank. Daniel noticed something else. No one looked directly at him anymore. They glanced. They acknowledged. But their eyes slid away before meeting his fully, as though prolonged contact would be impolite or dangerous. At the post office, he tried to call his sister. No signal. The clerk, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat. Phone lines are unreliable here. Internet. The clerk smiled faintly. You won't need it. Daniel leaned closer. Listen to me. I'm not staying. I don't belong here. The man lowered his voice. Everyone belongs somewhere. That's not how it works. It is here. By noon, Daniel began to notice the changes in himself. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't forget his name or his life or where he came from. It was smaller things, subtler. He reached for his wallet and hesitated, uncertain which pocket it was in, something he'd done thousands of times without thinking. He walked past the diner and felt a tug of recognition, as though he'd eaten there often, though he knew he hadn't. The scariest part was how quickly his mind tried to smooth over the inconsistencies. That afternoon, he met Evelyn. She worked at the small library near the edge of town, a narrow building with outdated computers and shelves that smelled of paper and dust. She looked to be around his age, maybe late 30s, early 40s. Tired eyes, careful posture. You're new, she said. Yes. She didn't correct him. They spoke quietly between the stacks. Daniel didn't know why he trusted her immediately, only that something in her expression mirrored the fear he was trying to suppress. I've been here 7 months, she said finally. I was passing through, wedding out west. Rental car trouble. You tried to leave. She nodded once. For the first few weeks. After that, it gets harder. Why? Evelyn hesitated. Because you start forgetting what you're leaving for. She showed him something then, a notebook hidden behind a row of outdated encyclopedias. Inside were lists, names, dates, observations. People's handwriting changed over time. Not gradually, abruptly. You see? She whispered. This is what happens. The town doesn't erase you all at once. It edits. Daniel swallowed. Why us? Evelyn's smile was bitter. We're not special. We're just available. That night, Daniel dreamed. He stood in the town square while people circled him slowly, their movements synchronized, their faces indistinct. The population number on the sign ticked upward with each pass. When he tried to speak, no sound came out. When he looked down at his hands, his fingerprints were gone. He woke at 2:17 a.m. This time, the footsteps were inside the room. Not moving. Standing. Daniel sat up slowly. There was a man near the window, or something shaped like one. His outline was slightly off, proportions subtly wrong, like a memory struggling to assemble itself correctly. You're resisting, the figure said in a voice that sounded almost apologetic. Daniel couldn't move. Most don't, the figure continued. It's easier to let the town carry the weight. What are you? Daniel managed. The figure tilted its head. Maintenance. When Daniel woke again, morning light filled the room. The figure was gone. But the motel key on the nightstand was no longer labeled room 6. It now read, resident. Daniel tore through the town records the next day with Evelyn's help. Old census data, property records, newspaper clippings. Pattern emerged. Briar Hollow's population never dropped. People didn't die here. They stayed. When someone grew too old, too sick, too broken, their name vanished quietly from records, replaced by another. The town didn't expand. It replaced. You can't just remove people from the world, Daniel said, though his voice lacked conviction. Evelyn met his gaze. You can if no one remembers them clearly enough to ask questions. They planned to leave together that evening, before it could adjust. But as Daniel returned to the motel to pack, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. The town sign read, Briar Hollow, population 1,104. He turned slowly. Evelyn stood across the street, her expression distant, unfocused. And in that moment, Daniel understood the most terrifying rule of Briar Hollow. The town doesn't only keep people, it trades them. Daniel didn't approach Evelyn immediately. He stayed where he was, standing on the opposite side of the street, watching her with the uneasy certainty that something fundamental had shifted. Her posture was the same, her clothes unchanged, but there was a hollowness in her expression that hadn't been there before. Not emptiness, alignment, as if she had finally stopped resisting a current she'd been swimming against for months. Evelyn, he called. She looked up slowly. Her eyes met his for half a second longer than anyone else's in town ever did. Then she smiled. You should hurry, she said. It gets confusing after sunset. Daniel crossed the street despite every instinct screaming at him not to. What happened? She tilted her head. I settled. No, he said. You were helping me leave. I was tired, Evelyn replied calmly. And the town helps when you're tired. Daniel glanced toward the square. People were gathering there now, drifting in without urgency. The sheriff stood near the flagpole. The waitress from the diner. The clerk from the post office. All watching, all waiting. They're replacing me with you, Daniel said. Evelyn didn't deny it. It doesn't have to hurt, she said softly. That's the part they don't tell you at first. If you stop fighting, it's actually peaceful. Daniel backed away. You don't remember what you were leaving for. Evelyn frowned just slightly. That doesn't matter anymore. He ran. The town didn't chase him. It didn't need to. The streets rearranged themselves with quiet efficiency, funneling him toward the edge of Briar Hollow where the forest pressed close. The air thickened with each step, not physically, but cognitively, like trying to think through fog. His thoughts slipped. Simple sequences unraveled. He forgot what street he'd turned onto seconds after doing it. He forgot the layout of the square he'd crossed dozens of times already. He stopped, hands on his knees, gasping. No, he whispered. No, no, no. A voice answered, calm and close. This is the difficult part. Daniel turned. The figure from the motel stood a few feet away. In daylight, it looked almost human. Almost. Its features were assembled correctly but without depth, like a composite image built from multiple memories. Your maintenance, Daniel said. The figure inclined its head. I facilitate transitions. You replace people. We balance, the figure replied. Briar Hollow maintains a stable population to preserve continuity. Sudden loss creates ripples, questions, investigations. So you erase them. We redistribute, the figure said. Some remain. Some become. Daniel laughed, the sound breaking. You're talking about people. Yes. Then you're not neutral. The figure paused. Neutrality is inefficient. Daniel bolted again, forcing his legs to move despite the resistance building in his muscles. The forest thinned suddenly, giving way to the road. His car sat exactly where he'd left it, keys still in his pocket. Hope surged sharp, dangerous. He reached the driver's door and froze. The interior was different. The seats were worn in unfamiliar patterns. The dashboard held a small photo tucked into the corner, a smiling group in front of the Briar Hollow sign. Daniel was in the picture, older, thinner, settled. His name was scratched into the steering wheel, etched deep enough to be permanent. Stop, he whispered. Behind him, footsteps approached, not hurried, not threatening. The sheriff stopped a few feet away. "You're causing distress," he said evenly. "For everyone. I'm leaving." "You already did," the sheriff replied. "Once." Daniel turned slowly. "Once." The sheriff sighed. "You came through Briar Hollow 10 years ago. Stayed 6 months. You resisted longer than most. Left just before full integration." Daniel shook his head violently. "That's not true." "You forgot," the sheriff said gently. "That's the mercy part." The truth hit him not as a revelation but as recognition. Fragments aligned. A sense of déjà vu that had followed him his entire adult life. The feeling of being misplaced. The recurring dream of a town he could never quite remember. "I came back," Daniel whispered. "Yes," the sheriff said. And the town noticed. The ground trembled faintly. In the distance, the population sign flickered. Population 1,104. Then slowly, 1,105. Evelyn stepped out of the crowd. Her eyes were clear now, focused. "I'm ready," she said. The figure from the motel moved closer. "A direct exchange will stabilize the system." Daniel looked at Evelyn. "If I stay, she leaves?" Evelyn hesitated, something flickering behind her eyes. "I think so." "That's not an answer. It's the only one there is." The town waited. Daniel felt the pull intensify, memories loosening at the edges. His sister's face blurred. His job title slipped away. Names of cities he'd lived in dissolved into generic impressions. He had seconds, maybe less. "Run," he told Evelyn suddenly. She blinked. "What?" "Don't think. Just run. Now." The figure reacted instantly, reaching for Daniel, but Daniel moved first. He shoved Evelyn toward the road, hard enough to knock her off balance. "Gio!" he shouted. For one impossible moment, the system hesitated. Evelyn ran. The town convulsed. Buildings shuddered. Windows cracked. People cried out, clutching their heads as memories scrambled. The population sign flickered wildly, numbers spinning too fast to read. Daniel dropped to his knees, pain lancing through his skull as the town tried desperately to anchor him. The figure loomed over him. "This outcome is unstable." Daniel laughed weakly. "Good." He felt something tear, not physically but internally, as the last of his resistance gave way. The pull reversed, collapsing inward instead of outward. The town went silent. When Evelyn crossed the boundary, the air snapped like a broken wire. Briar Hollow reset. Days later, a woman was found walking along Route 9, disoriented but alive. She remembered her name. She remembered where she was going. She remembered a man who had pushed her to run. She never remembered the town. Briar Hollow's population remained steady. And sometimes, when the forest is quiet and the light hits the road just right, a man can be seen standing near the square, familiar to everyone, unforgettable to no one, watching the road with an expression that suggests he's waiting for something he once lost, or someone.